The last time she had seen him was etched into her mind like a scar. A morning fishing trip he insisted on taking despite her protests. Days later, his boat was found wrecked, his belongings scattered along the shore near Charleston. The authorities searched for a week before concluding that his body had been lost to the currents. Nadia had arranged a memorial service, eulogized him through tears, and filed the life insurance claim that was meant to provide some semblance of stability for her family. And now, the man who had been buried in her memory stood not 30 feet away, laughing easily, his arm wrapped around a woman who looked to be in her late 20s. They were seated on the outdoor terrace, illuminated by the restaurant's amber glow, their conversation punctuated by carefree laughter. The sound was a cruel mockery of the grief Nadia had spent the last year struggling to endure. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched Leon, now visibly healthier and sporting a well-trimmed beard, lean closer to the woman, his fingers entwined with hers. It felt like the world had narrowed to that single, brutal moment. Her mind replayed everything she'd done to rebuild their lives in his absence, comforting Jaden during his panic attacks, supporting Maya through her depressive episodes, working long hours to cover expenses their savings couldn't meet. All of it was founded on the belief that Leon was dead, his tragic accident an inexplicable misfortune, but here he was, alive and carefree, indulging in an existence free of responsibility or remorse. Nadia's immediate instinct was to confront him, to storm up to their table and tear away the facade he had so carefully constructed, but anger, she had learned, was a fleeting emotion. Her mind shifted from fury to calculation. She pulled out her phone and snapped several photos, her fingers trembling with equal parts rage and disbelief. This wasn't just betrayal, it was something worse. Leon hadn't simply left them, he had erased them from his life. She watched for several more minutes, her eyes fixed on Leon's every move, as if trying to absorb the staggering reality of his existence. The woman he was with tossed her head back in laughter, completely unaware of the truth. Nadia's fingers itched to expose Leon's treachery right then and there, but she forced herself to remain calm. In the hospital world, she had learned that precision and patience were the tools of true power. Her confrontation would come on her terms. Turning away from the scene, Nadia walked swiftly back to her hotel, her heart pounding so violently it made her feel nauseous. By the time she reached her room, she could barely breathe. Her phone buzzed with a text from a colleague reminding her about the evening's networking event. She replied with a quick excuse and threw the phone onto the bed, her mind swirling with a storm of emotions. Leon was alive, not dead, living a new life, while his family mourned him. For the first time in a year, Nadia felt something sharp and bitter cutting through her sorrow. It wasn't pain or loss, it was resolve. Whatever game Leon was playing, she intended to end it. And this time, he wouldn't see her coming. Nadia Carter collapsed onto her hotel bed, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fury. As she stared at the ceiling, memories of her life with Leon flooded back, each one now tainted by suspicion. They had met 15 years ago at a real estate conference in Atlanta, where Leon's charisma and ambition had swept her off her feet. He was a rising star in the world of luxury property development, building a reputation for revitalizing historic buildings into high-end condominiums. Nadia, newly promoted to hospital administrator, admired his dedication and the passion he poured into his work. They married within a year, their mutual drive and determination building what she had believed was a solid foundation. They had built a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, their success reflected in lavish vacations and private school education for their children, Jaden and Maya. But their seemingly perfect life began to unravel long before Leon's alleged death. As Nadia scrolled through her memories with laser-focused precision, she pinpointed the signs she had ignored. Leon's career was demanding, late nights, weekend business trips, and conferences that left Nadia alone with the children more often than not. But even then, she had sensed something deeper was amiss. A year before his disappearance, Leon had grown increasingly irritable, his temper flaring over minor inconveniences. His absences became more frequent, his explanations vague. "Another investor meeting," he'd say with a dismissive wave of his hand, his eyes avoiding hers. Nadia had tried to be understanding, blaming their strained intimacy on the pressures of his career. After all, her own job often consumed her attention, the demands of the hospital leaving her exhausted and distant. Still, there were moments when she caught him staring at her with a peculiar intensity, as if he were calculating something rather than simply looking at his wife. Then came the day of his so-called accident. It was supposed to be a relaxing fishing trip, a rare moment of leisure Leon had insisted on taking alone. Nadia remembered his tone that morning, too cheerful, almost forced, as if he were playing a part. She had hugged him goodbye, felt the press of his lips on her forehead, and thought nothing of it until the phone call from the Coast Guard came 2 days later. His boat had been found shattered against the jagged rocks along the Charleston coastline, his belongings scattered through the wreckage, wallet, phone, clothes, all accounted for, but not his body. The search went on for days, authorities eventually deeming the strong currents responsible for his disappearance. They offered her sympathetic explanations, words meant to console a grieving widow, but Nadia had felt an unshakable emptiness rather than the finality of loss. The life insurance payout of $900,000 had been the only silver lining in an otherwise bleak year. The money allowed Nadia to pay off debts Leon had left behind, debts she hadn't even known existed until creditors came calling. It funded Jaden's music lessons, Maya's therapy sessions, and the mortgage payments that would have otherwise buried them in financial ruin. At the time, Nadia had been grateful for Leon's foresight in maintaining such a substantial policy, but now, her gratitude felt like a cruel joke. How much of their marriage had been a performance? Had Leon planned his own disappearance from the start, carefully constructing the illusion of a tragic accident to leave his old life behind? The questions multiplied as Nadia's mind replayed the inconsistencies she had previously dismissed. The rental car charge that appeared on their shared credit card 2 days after Leon's alleged death, which the company had chalked up to a billing error. A mutual acquaintance who swore they saw Leon at a gas station in Savannah weeks after his memorial service. And the fact that his passport was never found among his belongings. These details, once rationalized as mere mistakes or delusions of a grieving mind, now screamed of premeditation. Leon had orchestrated his own death, down to the finest detail, abandoning her and their children in the process. As the night wore on, Nadia's disbelief transformed into a blistering clarity. Leon had not been taken from her by tragedy, he had chosen to disappear. He had left her to navigate their shattered lives alone, to console their children through a pain he had deliberately inflicted, and now he was living comfortably in New Orleans, wining and dining another woman while she struggled to keep their family afloat. Betrayal bled into her veins, sharpening her mind with a new, ruthless purpose. Whatever his reasons, Leon had gambled everything on her ignorance. But Nadia was done being blindsided. She would uncover every last detail of his deception and make him pay for the devastation he had left behind. The morning after her shocking discovery, Nadia Carter woke with her jaw clenched and her fists still tight around her phone. Her mind churned with relentless urgency, demanding answers to questions she hadn't dared to ask the night before. Sleep had been impossible, her thoughts tangled with images of Leon's carefree laughter and the unfamiliar woman draped around his arm. It was as though she had glimpsed a parallel universe where her grief never existed, where Leon thrived while she crumbled under the weight of his supposed death. But now, with daylight slicing through her hotel room curtains, Nadia was no longer content to wallow in anger. She was a hospital administrator, accustomed to handling crises with precision and strategy. This, she decided, would be no different. Nadia's first call was to Sabrina Morales, a highly recommended private investigator known for her skill in untangling complex fraud cases. Sabrina's calm, efficient manner was a balm to Nadia's frayed nerves. After explaining her bizarre and painful situation, Nadia forwarded the photographs she had taken of Leon and the woman at the restaurant. Sabrina's immediate response, measured but not dismissive, convinced Nadia she had made the right choice. Within hours, Sabrina had traced Leon's activities through the remnants of their joint credit card account, a card Nadia had kept open out of sentimentality and ease when managing household expenses. She had rarely monitored the account, assuming whatever minor charges remained were automatic payments she had forgotten to cancel. But Sabrina's meticulous investigation revealed a trail of transactions impossible to ignore. According to Sabrina, the card had been consistently active for the past 4 months, primarily in New Orleans but also with recent charges from Biloxi, Mobile, and Baton Rouge, hotel stays, fine dining, jewelry purchases, concert tickets. Leon had not only survived but thrived, indulging himself while she and the children scraped by. Nadia's stomach churned as Sabrina continued her report. He's been using the name Victor Hayes, with a rented apartment in the Garden District and a new job at an architecture firm called Bourbon & Sons. He's listed as a senior project manager there. The revelation stung. Leon had always been proud of his work as a real estate developer, a man who reveled in the art of designing lavish structures that would outlast him. The idea of him using his skills to rebuild a life built on deception twisted Nadia's fury into something colder, more calculating. For the next 2 days, Nadia and Sabrina worked tirelessly to piece together the shattered fragments of Leon's double life. Sabrina's network of contacts proved invaluable, providing access to financial records, phone logs, and property rentals that would have otherwise been out of reach. Nadia was amazed by the sheer volume of information her investigator unearthed. Leon had been living as Victor Hayes for months, using a fabricated identity to secure a high-paying position at his new firm. The betrayal deepened with every discovery. He had built a new life, not from desperation or necessity, but from selfishness and greed. Even more alarming was Sabrina's uncovering of suspicious financial dealings that had occurred before Leon's supposed death. Multiple accounts in his name, accounts Nadia had never known existed, had been drained and transferred to offshore accounts. Sabrina explained that Leon's alleged boating accident had conveniently coincided with the collapse of a major development project he had been managing. The investors, furious over the financial losses, had begun threatening legal action shortly before his disappearance. Leon had staged his death to escape both the consequences of his failed investments and his mounting debts. Armed with this information, Nadia's rage began to solidify into something sharper: purpose. She could not allow Leon's betrayal to destroy her family's future, but confronting him without evidence would be futile. Leon had always been a master manipulator, skilled at twisting narratives to suit his needs. Nadia needed indisputable proof, a record of his deception that would hold up under scrutiny. Sabrina was already a step ahead. "If you're willing," she proposed, her voice steady and professional, "I can set up surveillance to monitor his activities. Photographs, recordings, whatever it takes to document his fraud. But you'll need to be prepared. This could get ugly." Nadia's answer was immediate: do it. She could no longer afford the luxury of hesitation or mercy. Leon had made his choices, and now she would make hers. Sabrina wasted no time deploying her network of surveillance experts, tracking Leon's daily movements with a precision that both comforted and terrified Nadia. Each update Sabrina sent was like a knife driven deeper into her chest. Photographs of Leon leaving his luxury apartment with the same woman. Recordings of phone calls where he discussed business deals under his false name. Even footage of him dining at expensive restaurants, laughing and carefree. Every new piece of evidence reinforced the truth Nadia had reluctantly accepted. Leon had never been the man she believed him to be. His betrayal was not a desperate act of survival. It was a deliberate scheme, meticulously planned and executed to free himself from the obligations he had long since resented. By the end of the week, Sabrina presented Nadia with a comprehensive dossier detailing Leon's fraudulent activities, but it wasn't enough. Nadia wanted more. She needed a confrontation wherewith Leon to acknowledge his treachery and suffer the consequences of his actions. The decision was made. Nadia would confront Leon in public, where he couldn't simply disappear or twist the truth to suit his narrative. Sabrina advised caution, but Nadia's resolve was unshakable. She would not be silenced. She would not be fooled again. This time, Nadia would be the one in control, and Leon would have no place left to hide. Nadia Carter's hands trembled slightly as she stepped out of the sleek black sedan, her pulse thrumming like a war drum. The late evening air was thick with the scent of magnolias and damp pavement, the Garden District's grand mansions casting long shadows beneath the gas lamps. The upscale restaurant Le Soleil exuded sophistication and exclusivity, its polished glass facade reflecting the amber glow of the streetlights. Sabrina Morales had meticulously planned every detail of the confrontation. As Nadia crossed the threshold into the restaurant's opulent lobby, her heels clicking against the marble floors, Sabrina was already in position, seated discreetly at a table by the corner, her camera concealed within an innocuous leather purse. The tiny microphone clipped beneath Nadia's necklace would capture every word of what she intended to be an unforgettable encounter. Leon, or rather Victor Hayes, had made reservations for a romantic dinner with his new girlfriend Camille, a woman whose elegance and youthfulness only intensified Nadia's seething anger. Sabrina had confirmed the reservation earlier in the day and sent Nadia the precise details. 7:30 p.m., corner table near the fireplace. A cozy, intimate setting perfect for two lovers oblivious to the destruction their happiness had caused. Nadia arrived precisely at 7:45 p.m., timing her entrance to avoid the initial flow of guests, but ensuring the restaurant was filled enough to provide a healthy dose of spectators. She took a deep breath, steadied her nerves, and approached the hostess with the calm, collected poise she had mastered over years of hospital administration. "Good evening. I'm here to meet Victor Hayes," Nadia said, her voice smooth but laced with underlying tension. The hostess glanced down at her reservation list before nodding with a polite smile. "Right this way, ma'am." As she followed the hostess through the dining area, Nadia's gaze locked on to her target. Leon was seated with Camille, their heads bent together as they shared a bottle of wine. His laughter rang out, light and unburdened, the same laugh Nadia had not heard since the early years of their marriage. She forced herself to focus on her breathing, inhaling deeply to quell the burning sensation rising in her chest. This was not the time for emotional outbursts. This was about control, about exposing Leon's deceit for what it truly was. Without waiting to be introduced, Nadia slid into the empty chair across from them. Leon's smile faltered instantly, his eyes widening in shock as he registered her presence. Camille looked puzzled, glancing between them with evident concern. "Victor?" she asked hesitantly, her hand tightening around his. Nadia's gaze remained fixed on Leon. She said, her tone deceptively calm, "You know, the husband I buried a year ago?" The color drained from Leon's face, his carefully constructed facade unraveling before her eyes. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, his gaze darting toward Camille as if searching for an escape. "Nadia?" Leon's voice was barely more than a whisper, his attempt at authority undermined by the palpable terror etched across his features. Camille's expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Husband? Victor, what is she talking about?" Camille demanded, her voice rising in pitch. "You told me you were divorced, never married." Nadia allowed herself a bitter smile. "I suppose that was easier than telling her you faked your own death to escape your debts and leave your family destitute," she said, her words cutting through the air like blades. Nadia, I can explain, Leon stammered, his eyes flickering toward the exits as if already planning his escape. Explain? Nadia echoed, her voice dripping with disdain. Explain how you abandoned your own children? How you drained our accounts and left me to pick up the pieces of a life you shattered? No, Leon. You're not here to explain. You're here to listen. Sabrina's words of caution rang in her ears. Keep him talking. Gather evidence. Nadia leaned forward, her voice lowering to a hiss. I know everything. Your new life as Victor Hayes. Your job at Bourbon & Sons. Your lavish apartment. Your weekends away with Camille. I've been tracking you for weeks. Leon's bravado crumbled. The man who had once exuded confidence now looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting between Nadia and Camille, who had pushed her chair back, staring at him in utter disbelief. Is this true? Camille choked out, her voice trembling. You lied about everything? Leon reached for her hand, but she recoiled, her face twisted with disgust. Camille, please, it's not what you think, he pleaded. It's exactly what she thinks, Nadia interjected, her voice unyielding. You lied to her the same way you lied to me, the same way you lied to our children. And for what? To escape the mess you made of your own life? The restaurant had gone silent, curious diners straining to catch fragments of the drama unfolding before them. Leon shifted uncomfortably, his desperation morphing into anger. You don't understand, Nadia. I was protecting you. I made some bad investments, got mixed up with dangerous people. If I hadn't disappeared, they would have come after all of us. Nadia laughed, the sound harsh and joyless. Protecting us? By leaving us to fend for ourselves while you played house with your mistress? You weren't protecting us, Leon, you were protecting yourself. Leon's gaze hardened, his voice dropping to a low growl. What do you want, Nadia? Money? I can split what's left of the insurance payout with you. The audacity of his offer only fueled her rage. The money you weren't entitled to in the first place? Nadia shot back. The money meant to support your children after their father's supposed death? Leon's silence was answer enough. Nadia glanced briefly at Sabrina's table, her friend's nod of reassurance bolstering her resolve. The audio was clear, every word recorded, every admission documented. I'm not here for money, Leon, Nadia said, her voice suddenly calm. I'm here for the truth, and to make sure you pay for what you've done. Camille rose from her seat, tears brimming in her eyes. Stay away from me, you lying, manipulative coward, she spat, before storming out of the restaurant. Leon reached after her, but his hand fell limply to his side, his face pale and stricken. You've ruined everything, he whispered. Nadia shook her head slowly. No, Leon, you did that all by yourself. Rising to her feet, she walked away, leaving her husband paralyzed by the weight of his own deceit. The evidence Sabrina had gathered was undeniable, and Nadia had no intention of letting him escape justice. Nadia Carter's determination only solidified as she sat across from Henry Calhoun, a seasoned financial fraud attorney with a reputation for dismantling complex schemes like the one Leon had constructed. They met in his polished, minimalist office in downtown Atlanta, sunlight filtering through the glass walls, as Henry sifted through the meticulously gathered evidence Nadia and Sabrina had compiled. His calm, methodical approach reassured Nadia, even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. From what you've shown me, Henry said, tapping a finger against the stack of documents, Leon's actions constitute multiple felonies: insurance fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and possibly securities fraud if he funneled investor money into his offshore accounts. The fact that he staged his death to avoid financial and legal repercussions only deepens his culpability. The word culpability felt heavy, but also satisfying. For the first time since discovering Leon's betrayal, Nadia felt like she was no longer grasping in the dark. Henry explained that the insurance company, already alerted by Nadia's tip-off, was eager to make an example out of Leon. They had initiated their own investigation, freezing what remained of the insurance payout and preparing to pursue legal action to reclaim the funds. But Henry's involvement went beyond simple restitution. He was building a case designed to hold Leon accountable on every possible front. "Your decision to document the confrontation was smart," Henry praised, reviewing Sabrina's recordings with an approving nod. "The admission of faking his death, combined with the evidence of his new identity and employment, gives us a solid foundation. It's not just hearsay, it's verifiable fraud." Nadia's sense of relief was tempered by the knowledge that she still had a difficult road ahead. The insurance company's lawyers were relentless, but Henry assured her they would not hold her financially liable for Leon's crimes. "You were a victim of his deception, not a co-conspirator," he clarified. "The money you used to pay off debts and provide for your children was a legitimate necessity for a widow who believed her husband was dead. Still, the possibility of being dragged into Leon's legal quagmire left her uneasy." Henry outlined the likely trajectory of the case. Leon would be arrested, charged, and prosecuted in federal court. If convicted, he faced years in prison and substantial financial penalties. The insurance company would seek restitution for the fraudulent payout, though Henry believed Nadia's cooperation would mitigate her involvement in any civil action. "They're not interested in ruining you," Henry assured her. "Their focus is on making an example of him." As Nadia absorbed this information, she realized how little sympathy she felt for Leon's impending fate. He had built his escape on the bones of their family's stability, abandoning her and their children without a second thought. His attempts to frame his betrayal as a misguided act of protection were laughable at best. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, affidavits, and depositions. Nadia provided every piece of evidence Sabrina had uncovered, from the credit card transactions to the recordings of her confrontation with Leon. The FBI's white-collar crime unit became involved once Sabrina uncovered evidence that Leon had funneled his ill-gotten gains into offshore accounts. His tangled web of deceit was unraveling rapidly, and the authorities were determined to see him held accountable. Henry's reassurance remained a constant in the chaos. His strategic mind dissected every aspect of Leon's fraudulent scheme, preparing for the inevitable court battle with a precision Nadia could only admire. Yet, even as the legal process marched forward, Nadia found herself haunted by a nagging question. What would happen to her children once the truth came out? Jaden and Maya had already endured so much, mourning a father who wasn't truly dead and rebuilding their lives under the weight of his absence. To discover that Leon had deliberately abandoned them, lied to them, would be a fresh wound, one Nadia feared would be nearly impossible to heal. But hiding the truth from them was no longer an option. The moment she had decided to pursue legal action against Leon, she had accepted that their lives would be thrust into the spotlight. Henry encouraged her to prepare her children emotionally before the case went public. "They deserve the truth," he advised gently. "Better to hear it from you than through a news report or a lawyer's deposition." Nadia agreed, though the prospect of shattering their hard-won stability made her chest ache. Leon's betrayal was not just a personal affront, it was a nuclear detonation in their family's fragile peace. The legal battle ahead was daunting, but Nadia's resolve was unwavering. She had been blindsided once by Leon's treachery. This time, she would face the truth head-on, no matter how painful the process. With Henry's guidance and Sabrina's relentless pursuit of the truth, Nadia felt better prepared to confront the storm Leon had left in his wake. The pursuit of justice had begun, and Nadia was determined to see it through to the end. Nadia Carter's determination only solidified as she sat across from Henry Calhoun, a seasoned financial fraud attorney with a reputation for dismantling complex schemes like the one Leon had constructed. They met in his polished minimalist office in downtown Atlanta, sunlight filtering through the glass walls as Henry sifted through the meticulously gathered evidence Nadia and Sabrina had compiled. His calm, methodical approach reassured Nadia, even as her stomach twisted with anxiety. "From what you've shown me," Henry said, tapping a finger against the stack of documents. Leon's actions constitute multiple felonies: insurance fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and possibly securities fraud if he funneled investor money into his offshore accounts. The fact that he staged his death to avoid financial and legal repercussions only deepens his culpability. The word culpability felt heavy, but also satisfying. For the first time since discovering Leon's betrayal, Nadia felt like she was no longer grasping in the dark. Henry explained that the insurance company, already alerted by Nadia's tip-off, was eager to make an example out of Leon. They had initiated their own investigation, freezing what remained of the insurance payout and preparing to pursue legal action to reclaim the funds. But Henry's involvement went beyond simple restitution. He was building a case designed to hold Leon accountable on every possible front. "Your decision to document the confrontation was smart," Henry praised, reviewing Sabrina's recordings with an approving nod. "The admission of faking his death, combined with the evidence of his new identity and employment, gives us a solid foundation. It's not just hearsay, it's verifiable fraud." Nadia's sense of relief was tempered by the knowledge that she still had a difficult road ahead. The insurance company's lawyers were relentless, but Henry assured her they would not hold her financially liable for Leon's crimes. "You were a victim of his deception, not a co-conspirator," he clarified. "The money you used to pay off debts and provide for your children was a legitimate necessity for a widow who believed her husband was dead. Still, the possibility of being dragged into Leon's legal quagmire left her uneasy." Henry outlined the likely trajectory of the case. Leon would be arrested, charged, and prosecuted in federal court. If convicted, he faced years in prison and substantial financial penalties. The insurance company would seek restitution for the fraudulent payout, though Henry believed Nadia's cooperation would mitigate her involvement in any civil action. "They are not interested in ruining you," Henry assured her. "Their focus is on making an example of him." As Nadia absorbed this information, she realized how little sympathy she felt for Leon's impending fate. He had built his escape on the bones of their family's stability, abandoning her and their children without a second thought. His attempts to frame his betrayal as a misguided act of protection were laughable at best. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, affidavits, and depositions. Nadia provided every piece of evidence Sabrina had uncovered, from the credit card transactions to the recordings of her confrontation with Leon. The FBI's white-collar crime unit became involved once Sabrina uncovered evidence that Leon had funneled his ill-gotten gains into offshore accounts. His tangled web of deceit was unraveling rapidly, and the authorities were determined to see him held accountable. Henry's reassurance remained a constant in the chaos. His strategic mind dissected every aspect of Leon's fraudulent scheme, preparing for the inevitable court battle with a precision Nadia could only admire. Yet, even as the legal process marched forward, Nadia found herself haunted by a nagging question: what would happen to her children once the truth came out? Jaden and Maya had already endured so much, mourning a father who wasn't truly dead and rebuilding their lives under the weight of his absence. To discover that Leon had deliberately abandoned them, lied to them, would be a fresh wound, one Nadia feared would be nearly impossible to heal. But hiding the truth from them was no longer an option. The moment she had decided to pursue legal action against Leon, she had accepted that their lives would be thrust into the spotlight. Henry encouraged her to prepare her children emotionally before the case went public. "They deserve the truth," he advised gently. "Better to hear it from you than through a news report or a lawyer's deposition." Nadia agreed, though the prospect of shattering their hard-won stability made her chest ache. Leon's betrayal was not just a personal affront. It was a nuclear detonation in their family's fragile peace. The legal battle ahead was daunting, but Nadia's resolve was unwavering. She had been blindsided once by Leon's treachery. This time, she would face the truth head-on, no matter how painful the process. With Henry's guidance and Sabrina's relentless pursuit of the truth, Nadia felt better prepared to confront the storm Leon had left in his wake. The pursuit of justice had begun, and Nadia was determined to see it through to the end. The months that followed were a grueling, surreal blur for Nadia Carter and her children as the legal process against Leon, now publicly known as Victor Hayes, unfolded. His arrest at a New Orleans airport, attempting to board a flight to Mexico under his false identity, had been swift and efficient. News outlets seized upon the scandalous tale of a wealthy real estate developer who faked his death to evade financial ruin and his family's responsibility. Nadia's name was splashed across headlines, her integrity questioned by some but defended by many who admired her strength and resolve. As the investigation expanded, the full scope of Leon's deception emerged. His crimes included insurance fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and complicity in a securities scam involving a failed real estate project that had left numerous investors financially crippled. The FBI's white-collar crime unit, bolstered by Sabrina's meticulous dossier, built an airtight case. Facing an overwhelming amount of evidence, Leon's legal team pushed for a plea deal to avoid the maximum sentence. The courtroom proceedings were formalities to Nadia, painful reminders of betrayal, yet essential steps toward closure. Leon pleaded guilty to multiple charges, his expression a hollow imitation of remorse as he addressed the court. "I convinced myself I was protecting them," he claimed, his voice cracking in a performance Nadia could see through with brutal clarity. "But I was only protecting myself." The judge, unimpressed by Leon's contrition, handed down an 8-year federal prison sentence with additional financial penalties aimed at recouping the fraudulent insurance payout. Nadia sat rigid in her seat as the verdict was delivered, her emotions a twisted knot of vindication, grief, and exhaustion. The insurance company pursued civil action to recover the funds, but Henry Calhoun's diligent advocacy ensured that the money Nadia had used for legitimate expenses, mortgage payments, her children's education, and their essential needs, would not be reclaimed. Still, the financial strain was palpable, and the emotional toll even greater. Leon's sentencing marked the beginning of a painful but necessary healing process. The media frenzy eventually died down, and Nadia found herself able to resume her work as a hospital administrator with a renewed focus. Therapy sessions with Dr. Foster became a cornerstone of her family's recovery. Jaden channeled his anger and confusion into his music, pouring his pain into lyrics that resonated with audiences beyond his small high school community. Maya, on the other hand, transformed her grief into advocacy. She launched a fraud awareness campaign at her school, determined to educate others about the signs of financial manipulation and emotional deceit. Nadia marveled at her children's resilience, their determination to rebuild their lives despite the scars Leon's betrayal had left. Nadia herself emerged stronger, her resolve tempered by the ordeal, but unbroken. Her work at the hospital became a refuge, a place where she could channel her energy into helping others navigate their own struggles. Occasionally, her past would resurface in unexpected ways. An offhand remark from a colleague, a newspaper article referencing Leon's case, but the pain had dulled to a distant ache rather than a fresh wound. More than anything, Nadia found solace in her children's progress, their bravery in confronting the truth and using their pain as fuel for growth. In the quiet moments, when the weight of everything threatened to overwhelm her, Nadia would remind herself of one simple truth. They had survived, and no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. 1 year after Leon's sentencing, Nadia Carter stood at the edge of her porch, gazing out over the Atlanta skyline with a calmness she hadn't felt in years. The bitter chaos Leon had unleashed upon their family had finally settled, replaced by a resilient peace built on hard-won truths and newfound strength. She had returned to her role as hospital administrator with renewed purpose, embracing her work as a lifeline rather than a burden. The emotional scars Leon had left would always be a part of her, but Nadia had learned to carry them with dignity instead of shame. Therapy sessions with Dr. Foster continued, but now they felt more like reflections on growth, rather than attempts to piece herself back together. The children were healing too in their own ways. Jaden, now a high school senior, had found his voice through music, his lyrics raw and unapologetic as he transformed his pain into art. His songs, shared online, had attracted a growing audience who resonated with his authenticity. Maya, driven by the betrayal that had nearly broken her, poured her energy into advocacy. Her fraud awareness campaign at school had expanded into a community project, and she had even been invited to speak at local seminars about recognizing the signs of deception and financial abuse. Nadia's pride in her children's resilience was boundless. They had taken the wreckage of their past and rebuilt something meaningful, something stronger. Nadia herself found empowerment in sharing her story, though not in the sensationalized, exploitative way the media had once attempted. Instead, she spoke at support groups and seminars, offering her experience as proof that even the most shattering betrayals could be survived. Helping others heal gave her purpose, a way to turn her pain into something constructive. The money from the insurance payout, what the courts allowed her to keep, had gone toward ensuring her children's futures and toward building a small nonprofit dedicated to supporting victims of fraud and deception. It was a cause born from pain, but sustained by hope. Financial stability no longer felt like a lifeline. It felt like a tool she could wield with intention and grace. There were still difficult days, moments when grief or anger would resurface like stubborn embers refusing to be extinguished. But Nadia had learned to acknowledge them, to face them without flinching. They were reminders of her strength rather than her brokenness. As she watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the city in hues of gold and crimson, Nadia allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and loss, but she had emerged on the other side with her integrity intact. Her family was healing, their bonds stronger than ever, fortified by honesty and resilience. No longer defined by Leon's deceit, Nadia was finally free to define herself on her own terms. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it, not with fear, but with courage. And for the first time in a long while, Nadia felt truly at peace. The story of Nadia Carter is a powerful testament to resilience, integrity, and the transformative power of truth. Betrayed by her husband Leon's elaborate deception, Nadia's journey teaches us that facing painful truths head-on is essential for healing and growth. Instead of succumbing to bitterness or seeking vengeance, Nadia chose to confront Leon's betrayal with strength and intelligence. Gathering evidence and pursuing justice through legal channels, her ability to rebuild her life, despite immense emotional turmoil, highlights the importance of resilience and self-reliance. Moreover, her unwavering dedication to her children demonstrates the profound impact of choosing compassion and transparency over denial and anger. Through Nadia's story, we learn that betrayal, no matter how devastating, does not define us. Instead, it is our response to adversity that shapes our future. By turning her pain into advocacy and support for others, Nadia reclaimed her sense of purpose and integrity. The ultimate lesson is clear. Even when confronted with the worst kind of deception, we have the power to reclaim our narrative, rebuild our lives, and emerge stronger and wiser from the experience.